Good morning. I'm from the local Stantec office here in New Orleans. And this presentation, it's a local project we had. You may have seen it last night if you went to Mardi Gras World. This project's right in front of the convention center, so there's all kinds of construction out there. We're about midway through on that right now. It's not going to be nearly as technical as the last one. That one was great. But hopefully it gives you, a little bit insight into what's going on in the city, and that's basically what I'm trying to get to. Let's see. Start that up. Yeah. Right away, this project's a few years old, so it was developed in 5.4. So some of the visuals are a little old. We've updated some of it since then, but you might still see one or two things that they're a little old in there. Stantec, if you're aware, it's about a 24,000 person firm across multiple countries, and it's mostly engineers and architects, but we don't have any construction activities, but for some reason there's a real emphasis on safety, which is a great thing. So they always want us to have a safety moment before our presentations. I usually go to my wife for them. She's got better ideas than I do. And so she suggested something with our little kid, 2-year-old kid there, riding a stroller on public transit. So anytime you're on public transit, whether it be a bus or a train or something, make sure you secure all your valuables, especially people. So lock those stroller wheels. And that was a recent trip we took to Niagara Falls, which is pretty fun. Also, before we get started, just a brief overview of the project team. So the client was the Convention Center. They're a division of the state of Louisiana. And then the prime on the work was actually a joint venture of two architects, two really good local architects, Manning Architects and SQ Dumas Ripple. Ourselves, Stantec, Hall Planning and Engineering, which is a small firm out of Florida, which focuses on bikes and pedestrians. And then for the design, it was Stewart Consulting Group, did the civil design. Spackman, Mossop Michaels did the landscape architecture. It's not on there, but the contractor is Landis, is the prime contractor. And just a little shout out for SimCap Louisiana Group, something we started about a year ago. Chris Melson, who presented yesterday, actually took the lead in setting that up. And so we're still kind of getting our feet, but if anybody wants to offer to present at one of our, we have sessions about 2 or 3 months every so, let me know. So Convention Center Boulevard, Linear Park, what is it? You'll see about 15 years ago, the city of New Orleans was looking at expanding the riverfront park space in the city and start reclaiming more and more of that. If you've been to the French Quarter, there's that really nice park space up front, right around the middle where it says Waldenberg Park. There's already really good park space, been there for about 50 years. And so there was a desire to increase that linear space along the river. The project we'll be talking about, that little linear parks piece, you'll notice it's a little bit away from the river. That's because of a few challenges for that area. One of them is the Port of New Orleans operates 2 cruise terminals right in that area. So they have a lot of security concerns having people walking along on the waterfront. And then the other issue is the convention center itself. So it's about a mile-long building that's monolithic, so there's no way to get through it towards the river. It's basically just a big wall. The neighborhood to the south, that's the warehouse district. It's kind of a hip area to live. There's some good restaurants, hotels, restaurants. Might have said restaurants twice, but there's a good neighborhood there. But if you're there, you can see that there's really nowhere to locate a park along this street as currently built. It's a 4-lane divided roadway. You'll see there's a lot of buses that usually come whenever there's an event in town, but it's not a very walkable space. So the vision, this is where the architects come in. They said, hey, let's get rid of the cars, let's put a park in, get some nice trees, water features, all that cool stuff. And in order to do that, you have to bring the roadway down from a 4-lane divided to a 2-lane undivided, or as is commonly known, a road diet. We usually don't use that word too much when we're advertising these things because diets for some reason have negative connotations. So just to walk through the project, it starts all the way down at Poydras, so down by Harrah's, and the entire length down the street. You'll see there's the trees and the park features. That's where the convention center starts up. It's not going to break the whole rest of the way through. Improved pedestrian crossings. When we went out there were no crosswalks or anything, so those convention goers would just dart across the street. Very dangerous. There's a Heritage Park, which was a connection point to kind of be able to get across there, link that up. You'll see right there is the Transportation Center, which was a new feature also that we had here to handle all those buses. and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And it goes all the way down to Henderson Street, where it ends. And Henderson Street's the street you take to get to Morial World. So that would be at the top of the screen up there. And just to the right, you see all that green space. That's the edge of about 47 acres of undeveloped land, which is the largest developable area closest to downtown in the city. Convention Center owns all that property, and the desire is to build that out, complete the street grid, and continue this park, this linear park, and get a connection to the river. There's actually an RFP out for developers right now to start getting the ball rolling on that. Project goals, so outside of, all the good stuff it would do for the convention center, but also just to help the neighborhood increase mobility. We looked at a few parallel streets that maybe they weren't using their full capacity. There were a few like one-way, two-way issues where streets would change direction, and so you didn't have as many cars as maybe you could fit. Increased opportunities for multimodal, so we were looking at a lot of pedestrians, buses, taxis, stuff like that, and reduced congestion along Convention Center Boulevard. Stantec kind of got brought into this. We had done a study for the state DOTD along the Pontchartrain Expressway, which is the overhead expressway, goes to the bridge. We had done a very detailed Vissim model for that. And the more the convention center looked at the issues they were having, they thought, we think we need a model like that, because the more traditional types of software really couldn't explain how that road was operating. Just to show the study area, you'll notice the city of New Orleans, since it's an old city, it's built around the river, you don't have a well-defined street grid. There's a little bit of a grid look in there, but the roads follow the river. So instead of having north, south, east, west streets, you have streets that go downriver and upriver, and then the cross streets either go to the river or they go to the lake, which is basically opposite of that. And you're confined in there. So sometimes the streets, they're coming in different angles. You get some weird intersections every now and then, just the way they come together. And Vissim was very useful for modeling that. There's our study area. Like I said, we did a couple of parallel streets down, and then basically the length of the study. There's a little snapshot of the model. All right, so existing conditions, what were we trying to work through? What did we see when we got into it? So you'll see a lot of buses, a lot of taxis, and not a lot of people moving. Not just because it's a static picture, but it really was like that. So you got 2 lanes in each direction and then an 8-foot parking lane. And the buses would do their pickups in that parking lane, but a bus is about 8 feet wide to begin with. So if they try to park in there, they start blocking that outside lane. And so what you would see is you really get wound up with just a one-lane street whenever you had an event. Same thing with the taxis and the ride shares like Uber and Lyft. They kind of operated wherever. They drop off on the convention center side of the street, sometimes they would do it on the other side of the street, and things get very slow. So, we model that in Vissim, and we're able to see some very similar things with the way the routing was. Another unique challenge in this area is the Port of New Orleans has a cargo terminal. Their main cargo area is just upriver of here, and their only access in and out goes right through this area up onto the overhead expressway. You see, we've got modeling of the trucks going through there. We color-coded them so you know which ones are the port trucks. They're all port trucks in this picture, if you noticed. And there's the routing. So the convention center would have been at the top of that, and then the trucks are following that kind of route. And the other thing, this is where the Rick Hall came into play, looking at the Walkability Index, which I know he had a major part in developing. A way to score the comfort of pedestrians in an urban area. It has to do with a lot of things, like what's your right-of-way width, what's your building height, what kind of trees you have, and all those type of things. And he basically found that the existing conditions were not very conducive to pedestrians. For proposed solutions, so for the buses and the taxis and the rideshare, the idea was to create a multimodal transportation center. Somewhere near the middle of the building. It got located underneath that overhead expressway. There are several parking lots owned by DOTD that the convention center basically leased. They had a use agreement. They just used it for employee parking. They said we can move those employees, park somewhere else, and we can locate a transit hub here. And so on the left side, you'll see the main bus terminal there's, I think, 19 spaces for buses, and there's even those little black ones are staging areas, and there's additional staging off-site. And on the right, there's a taxi and rideshare lot. Personally, I'm still not sure how well used it's going to get, but as part of this work, the city agreed to produce an ordinance that no stopping on Convention Center Boulevard, and gave the Convention Center ticketing authority for people who stop. So what's most likely is going to happen, a lot of those rideshare are going to do pickups on the cross streets, but as long as they're not doing on more of the major thoroughfares, I think that's a win. And then the last feature you'll see in that bus lot, you see there's the hashed area is all the pedestrians. There's a big mid-block crosswalk. This is an older layout. As the modeling went on, it kind of modified. You see, originally we had the pull-through bus spaces. Actually, through discussions with the bus companies, they told us they'd actually rather back their buses up than have to drive across pedestrian pathways, which was a surprise for me, but it worked out. Also, because this down here at the bottom, the Convention Center doesn't actually have access to this whole lot. There was one other property owner. They had like a little sliver. From back when the bridge was built, I guess DOTD didn't need that little sliver, so they just left it. So there's this guy who has this little parking lot, and they tried to buy it from him. He said, no, I might build a hotel there one day. It's like in between two bridges, but regardless, hopefully we made it work. So just to show the bus routing, so originally the buses would come down near the bottom, up Chapatulas, turn on to Henderson, and then go down Convention Center Boulevard and do all their drop-offs there, and then headed back towards all those hotels on the left side downtown. And then the new routing that we had is they still come up Chapatulas, but they would turn towards Transportation Center and then do their return on South Peters. And those are a two-way or a one-way couplet, I guess. One goes one way and one goes the other way. Yeah. And for all the bus stops in there, we had some partial PT routes that we used to assign them to the different ones. We weren't focusing too much on how that transportation center would operate, but just to show that it could operate. The major concerns of most of the stakeholders were the surface streets. For the linear park, obviously you have a lot of pedestrians, a lot of crosswalks, and like I said, this is in 5.4, so we don't have the newest and greatest visualizations, but we did model all the crosswalks. We added some new signalized intersections. We tried to locate them in spots where we thought people were crossing, and as part of this convention center was creating new front doors, like I think about 3 front porches as they were, and then on the right side there's that big mid-block crossing for the transportation center, and that was a big concern of DOTD about having a mid-block crossing. They said, why don't you put the pedestrians at the intersections? And besides the fact that this makes it a lot more high-profile crossing for the pedestrians where you really notice that there's something going on, the phasing at those other 2 intersections on either side, if you added a pedestrian phase, you'd have to take out a vehicle phase. Just the way there are T intersections, and you wind up losing some time. In the middle, we were actually able to phase it where you didn't have to take time away from the outside intersections, but you could phase it inside of those. And the Vissim model was really important to be able to show that that would work and that you could do that, and it's not something you can really do with other uses. For the truck movements, this is some blue sky stuff that we showed. It, just in case anybody from the city's here, we are not still proposing to do this. We received some feedback. But we like to look at alternative intersections whenever we're doing something. This was kind of like a hybrid. So just a reduced phase intersection, kind of like a CFI or DDI, not really like either. We didn't get far enough into the development to really flesh that out. But the idea was, if you see the routing, that yellow, I think it's yellow, going to the left and then down, is the port truck movement. And then the one going from the left and then back up, that orange one, that's your buses and your shuttles and your taxis for the convention center. So the idea was something we could do to separate out those modes so that they don't have as much interaction and provide a little cleaner movement for everybody. This is just another kind of side angle view of that intersection of the trucks kind of crossing through there. Other scenarios, so the port is a major stakeholder. Like I said, they have a lot of cruise operations. Most of their big cruises happen on the weekend. They have cruises during the week, but on Saturdays they have 2 cruise ships at the same time operating. And so they said they wanted to see a model to make sure that none of these improvements would affect them. And the end result was that they didn't. You'll see down at Henderson, down here towards the bottom, they actually staged their trucks on the side of Henderson to service all the ships. So the trucks get there in the middle of the night, and then when the ships come, once the passengers get off, the trucks all go in, and they start delivering all the food and whatnot they need. You'll see there's some cars entering in there. They also enter at Henderson, then they exit back out at Julia on the other side. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really a big impact. And we're already at current project status. The under construction right now, they recently opened the transportation center. About a month ago or so, we had what they call a mock shuttle run. So they wanted to get some buses in there and see how it operates. And so they got 2 or 3 shuttle companies to supply about 20 buses, and they had about 60 convention center staff out there to see, run different scenarios. It was a little chaotic at first, getting everybody used to it. It was kind of new for some of these bus drivers, but at the end it worked out. There was one time, I think it's that one at the bottom, right? There was some concern about it has nothing to do with the modeling, it's just the design, that the buses might hit the curb, vertically hit the curb. And they said, oh, well, if you put people on it, the bus is going to get lower. And so they took all those 60 employees and they got up on the bus. And they said, oh, you got to, if you turn it's got hydraulics working to keep the bus up, you turn the bus off, it'll sink down. So they turned the bus off. And this is August in New Orleans, so all those poor employees were sitting there and started to sweat and get hot. But the bus did not move. It was okay. And from what I can tell, they've been using it for the past several events they've had, and this whole lot works pretty well. This is a video that we had done. And like I said, this is where the ugly 5.4 stuff starts coming in. But can't tell if it's... Yeah, there you go. It's kind of an overview. And then come down. So that's just Julia, so that's the one side of the building. You see the pedestrians crossing and all the, like the Vissim stuff. Traffic is not moving like super fast on the street, which we wanted to slow down anyway, but you'll see there's a lot of cars. They're moving kind of slow, but they're still moving. And that was our main purpose here. Our goal was to not have to move too many cars off of the street and not assume too much relocation. The ADT is just under 20,000, so you're in a good range for a road diet. Zoom around to the transportation center. You see all that stuff. See that Midblock Crossing. Get out of there. Okay. And you'll see some of the other stuff, like that little crossover movement that we had at one point in time. So as part of this, Chapatulas is currently two-way past. It's two-way through here, and then it turns to one-way a couple blocks down. So the idea was terminate the two-way there, and then make it one-way, and really kind of maximize that couplet between South Peters and Chapatulas. And this was another little piece where if you're trying to get to the interstate, you would kind of veer off. Most people do it naturally right now onto that street going down to the left. But modeling different options there. We tried roundabouts. We tried all different kinds of stuff, and it's very useful. And that's it. So I might have gone a little under my time, but I'll... Yeah, exactly. So hopefully we have lots of those. Yeah.
In the model, I noticed the traffic switched and went on opposite roads, like opposite directions.
Yeah.
Was there any? Was that acceptable with the county or the city?
At the end of the day, no. and our group, we do a lot of CFI designs around the country, and it's always a challenge. We did the first 2 like CFI in the country in Baton Rouge. There are none in New Orleans, so they're familiar with them, but they were not interested in such a high-profile location. But no hurt feelings there. It's just we were trying to think of something. What are some options? But no, they did not go for that. Oh. Yes.
Are they going to be putting in any bike lanes along the linear park?
Oh man, it kills me. So originally there were bike lanes, and we fought really hard to keep them for a long time. There was a two-way cycle track, basically on the park side of the road, two-way elevated cycle track. But then as part of we said the city was just a little antsy about this whole thing. They didn't want to lose their lanes, which is understandable. And so they pushed eventually to on the side opposite the convention center, where you've got all those hotels. They have loading lanes, and what wound up being put into design was that those loading lanes would be extra wide, so they wouldn't be 8 feet. They'd be like 10. They'd be like 14 feet wide loading lanes, the max allowable that NACTO would say that you could do, and it wound up choking out those bike lanes. The general impression is that the bikes are probably going to be able to ride through the park. It's not a sidewalk, so it's not really not allowed, and so they'll probably ride through the park space. But yeah, unfortunately, the bikes didn't make it. Nope.
No questions?
All right. Thank you.